This is Continuum Drag, a podcast where we watch sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between. This week, Children of Dune, Part 1.
So you are Bijaz.
Would I wear bijou and not Bijaz? A jewel is prettier than a horse's ass.
You're a mockery, then. A trick of nature meant to confuse and annoy.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast that's back on Arrakis. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
What's real? Let me take your water. That's what they say.
I don't know why that's so funny to me, but it tickles me. Out of context, it's a very funny thing to say to someone.
Well, it is one of those funny science fiction things where, like, yeah, you're in world, you're like, cool. And then in real world, you're like, nah, not so cool.
You're going to bully me for my water? Well, Jordan, in honor of the upcoming Max television series, Dune Prophecy, coming this fall, we're going to be watching the sequel to the Dune miniseries on Sci-Fi, Children of Dune.
Yeah, so this was from, 2003, I think? Again, we watched, I think it was 2019, we watched the first miniseries of this.
Yeah. And this is the follow-up. What do you remember of the original Dune miniseries?
There was a couple things I like. I kind of like their eye effects, the little like contact lens, whatever they're doing for their blue eyes, and some of the set pieces, like the ships, and some of the sets are surprisingly pretty good for like a mini series. Like, not all of it works out that well, and I know this did win some Emmys for some of the visual effects and stuff, but I think most of that was pretty good. And like, I think this book or these series of books, I think they work pretty well in a mini series format.
Here's what I remember about the original miniseries, Jordan. I gave each episode a 1.
You know what's funny? I purposely didn't go back and look. I couldn't remember what I had given them. I'm assuming it wasn't 1s, but I remember it being a little bit slow. And the spoiler, I actually think this one, for as much of a mess it is, I don't think it was as boring as some of the other ones were.
This is a drastic improvement for me anyway. I was just like, this is considerably better than what I watched last time.
Yeah. It's pretty much the same actors though, right?
I think in the lead roles, I didn't really look into it. I did see somewhere, maybe we'll look into this closer later, but like that they did recast quite a few people. But obviously the lead Paul Atreides is the same for sure.
Well, Lady Jessica's different.
Of course, now she's played by the Borg Queen.
Yeah. That's right. She's played by Alice Cringe. So that's one different. You're right. I think a few of the leads are the same. Like the main people. Like it's like I couldn't tell you if Duncan Idaho, dumbest character name ever, but I couldn't tell you if he was the same guy or not. Because who cares?
And here's a question for you. This miniseries is actually based on 2 of the books, Messiah of Dune and Children of Dune. Do you have any? Did you read that? Do you have any idea?
No, I've never read them. I do know a little bit about Dune Messiah, the second book, and I know it is, I think, a bit problematic to film because the basic conceit of it, from what I know, is, and I could be wrong on I obviously haven't read it, is that the whole first thing is about, this chosen Messiah, he's going to lead the people, and they're going to take over. But then what really happens is that, with a lot of these things, he's actually kind of a villain, that he becomes a dictator and is sort of like creating more suffering than any good. And I know that's a little bit harder book to adapt when your main character isn't someone that you're rooting for anymore.
Right. Yeah, I never read them either. I think after I watched the last Dune movie, I might have watched a YouTube explainer. So I think I know the highlights, but I didn't really know what was going to happen in these. So
I actually think there's something more interesting about what we're going to be seeing than the original Dune. I just find the whole there's someone special and there's something about them they don't know and they're going to learn about themselves, and it just seems like a video game character at this point. I'm just so tired of that trope of someone special who's plucked up from an orphanage or something, and they're just I'm bored of that trope. So once we pass it, I'm like, okay, now there's something more interesting. This idea of him having to be a leader and those political machinations, that's more interesting to me than he's chosen.
It definitely helps that you haven't seen it 3 times already, right? There's been 3 versions of this.
That's very true.
And I mean, from what I've read, to Mr. Herbert's credit, is the original book was supposed to be a critique of that trope.
Right.
And when it came out, he realized a lot of people miss the point, kind of like Scorsese movies. A lot of people are like, wouldn't that be cool to be Wolf of Wall Street? So he wrote Messiah to be like, no, you dummies. He's the bad guy.
Right. And I think that's interesting because I think it's a better take on that. And maybe him and I would get along because we're both bored of that trope.
Yeah. I think that was the initial thing. And when it came out, my understanding from what I've read is he's just like, he kind of noticed, he's like, how are people not getting this? He's like, I got to write another book where I hit them in the head with it, I guess.
It is funny, though, if you think of, major works of literature or film or anything where they're a huge success, but for the wrong reason. People just don't get the satire or they don't get it. It's an interesting thing when that happens.
Well, Jordan, this was broadcast on Sci-Fi March 16th through 18th, 2003. I had a quick look and to see what was going on in the world. Could you it's very specific. It's like 3 days in the world. Do you think anything might have happened in those 3 days?
In 2003, I'm trying to remember. I don't think anything specific was happening in my life.
March 17th, 2003. George W. Bush gives Saddam Hussein 48 hours to leave Iraq or he's coming in. And boy, oh boy, on the 19th, right after the series ended, did he come in a big way.
Yeah, they went in with their old shock and awe, remember?
So, yeah, it was literally moments away from the invasion of Iraq.
And it went so well and was over so quick.
Yeah, no problems. Mission accomplished, I believe. Jordan, mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished, yeah. Well, he said after it, he didn't mean the whole mission. He just meant that one day.
Well, and for us, Jordan, on Continuum Drag, a certain other sci-fi TV movie happened 4 days after Dune aired.
2003. I know it's wrong, but in my head, the first thing that comes up is Ultraviolet.
Well, it's for Sci-Fi. It's for the Sci-Fi Network. So it wouldn't be a British show.
No, I'm not sure.
It would be a TV movie. It would also be a TV movie.
Oh, right. Well, I'm wrong. But anyways, I think Ultraviolet.
As you recall, an American movie.
Yeah, as I recall, it would be Ultraviolet.
It was Riverworld.
Oh, Riverworld. What a fun time, though, that, good for Sci-Fi to just be making these kind of swinging for the fences for these...
classic sci-fi novels into TV shows. Yeah, they were going for it.
Yeah. And I didn't realize, I was looking, the executive producer of this is a guy named Richard P. Rubinstein. He also did the miniseries The Stand and The Langoliers. So he was I think he was the adaptation of hard books or long book guy sort of guy.
Yeah, I think that's the case too. I think he was the guy for this kind of thing in this period. Mm-hmm. He didn't do Tommyknockers though, did he?
He definitely didn't, because that's not very good. And I'll say real quick, this did win. It won one Emmy and was nominated for 3 other Emmys.
Oh, well, Jordan, you're going to have to bear with me because this summary's long, but here's the IMDb summary for part 1.
Okay.
12 years of war happened after the defeat of Emperor Shaddam IV, and in many places, the name Muad'Dib is no longer a prayer but a curse. Paul Atreides, the man who is Muad'Dib, faces many paradoxes, including being married by convenience to Princess Irulan while being in love with Chani, who doesn't seem to be able to give him a son for some reason. Meanwhile, Princess Wensikia Corino plots against Paul, a clone of Duncan Idaho, the fallen hero, and Muad'Dib's dearest friend is sent to him as a gift. And that was courtesy of David Del Real.
Well, thanks, David. A couple things came to mind while you're reading that. One, I do love that how dense these, I'm sure the books are, let alone how dense these miniseries episodes are, that you have to have a summary like that. But I also thought when I was watching this, I had to explain to Jamie in the room. She's like, so what's this about? And I started explaining it, and it sort of sounded just like that, where I was like, I'm exhausting myself. But what the main thing I like is while you were kind of struggling with a couple of the names, I'm really hoping people get angry at us again for not pronouncing things properly and getting things wrong.
People are definitely going to get mad at us again for mispronouncing these names. People get very mad at us for mispronouncing names. I understand. These are beloved, and we are dumb. We are very dumb people.
I love it. Honestly, everyone, let me tell you a little thing that'll help you out. Calm down. Calm down. It's a book. You're fine. You're fine.
Well, as it begins, it's 12 years after the events of Dune. As it said in the summary, Muad'Dib's army is wiping out the old emperor around the world, and as a result, people are dying, as visualized here, with an impressionistic battlefield full of bodies and kind of like white snow or something.
Yeah, I thought it actually looked pretty neat. It was like the voiceover did the heavy lifting and sort of like does show that like he's been not just like colonizing but like exterminating. So it's like it's carnage, and you get the image very quickly, and I think quite effectively, that like, oh, this is not the guy that you remember from the first one. This the guy that you champion. Like he's there's a very rough path to being the emperor.
Yeah. And the idea being that a lot of people obviously curse the Muad'Dib's name, and we see a man running to his blinded son, and we come to realize it's like perhaps even the Fremen are having some trouble now with their god king.
Yeah, and then he's like, Muad'Dib, and you're like, oh man, this does not look good. Then we check in at Arrakis / Dune, and everyone's like, just so you know, it's still important, spice. And I forgot how often they say spice. It's like nuts. It's like every line they're like, by the way, spice.
What I like is we go to Dune, and Paul Atreides, the Muad'Dib, he's we know he's the emperor, but what we see is he's doing the old Prince and the Pauper thing where he's dressed in a cloak, running around town, and all his advisors are like, don't go out there, sir. Someone might recognize you.
Yeah, and he's like, don't tell me what to do. I'm a different kind of emperor. I'm hip and cool, and if I want to walk among the people, I will. You're like, did you learn anything or interact with anyone? He's like, no, I just kind of walked in the shadows.
Just walked around. It's fine.
Yeah.
And he's still with his mistress / true love, Chani. She's been trying to get prego, but it's not working. So she goes out to see the Fremens, and they're like, yo, somebody's been slipping you some birth control. All you got to do is go on the Fremen diet, which consists of just eating nothing but spice, the worm poo that poisons the universe or powers the universe. I don't know. Both, I guess.
People are going to be so angry.
And then once you do that, it's going to accelerate your pregnancy to about 90 minutes of part 1 of the show.
I love the idea that there's like, something's wrong because I can't get pregnant. What it must be is someone is slipping me birth control. And then you find out like, yeah, they were.
That's correct.
It's correct.
Well, that's what's so funny. They're just like, I can't get pregnant. They're like, well, we can't figure out why, so maybe someone's poisoning you. We can't detect it. Who knows? Just eat this worm poo. It's fine.
Yeah, and then she's like, yeah, and so, yeah, spoiler, she getting pregnant.
And, of course, Paul is also, as the summary said, still married to his wife, his queen, Irulin. Of course, she's the one who's been slipping Chani birth control because she want that baby, not Chani. She want that Paul baby. And she's also, I guess, essentially serving as a spy for her other empire houses who are defeated. I'm not clear on
it's
that,
the family. I think it's the family she comes from is what it is who she's spying for. But let me ask you though, they don't whatever they're called. They're called the Corinos, I think.
Corino.
Corino, yeah.
Yeah, Corino.
My dad'd be like, it sounds Italian. Anyways, oh, you have to always know the ethnicity of people. I was interested that how much time they spent on certain aspects, the details of things. But this relationship, they only really give it a scene or two, the relationship between Paul and his wife. And I don't know if it's supposed to like show a sort of like parallel to his parents and their relationship. But he doesn't really, he even says at one point, like, I know I'm cruel to you. Like, that's the way it is. But it's like it's a marriage of convenience. But I was kind of curious that they didn't spend that much time on their relationship at all in this. Maybe it's going to be in more parts. But like you would think that would be a more crux of his life of having to balance that.
I'll be honest with you, Jordan. I could barely tell the difference between her, Chani, and his sister. So sometimes I didn't know who was talking. So they could have had tons of scenes. They could have had no scenes. I couldn't tell the difference between all these women they cast.
Well, I did at one point when it took me a while to realize who his sister was. And I do like the one training scene she has for no reason. But it was funny where you're like, why are there so many people that look alike? But I think part of it has to do with the
it's the filter that's on
the filter. Everything has this like patina on it, so it makes everyone kind of blend together.
Yeah, you have to have a very distinct face to stand out, and otherwise I was just kind of like, who's talking right now?
Yeah, Arrakis, man. Am I right?
Anyway, his wife, his queen, well, her sister, the princess Winsiskia Corina, I'm never gonna get it right. She's also there because she's got a plot, and she is played by Susan Sarandon, who's acting the hell out of this movie.
Yeah, it's funny. It's as if she's saying, this is fun and hilarious. ain't we all having a great time? And she's got like, every scene she's got a different weird gown on and weird hair and weird something headpiece, and she has like Romulan hair. Or Romulan bangs, at least.
She's great. Anytime she's on screen, I'm just like, great, fantastic. I'm loving this. She's just having the most fun.
There's two people that I feel like they're really like giving it, and no offense to the guy who plays the lead. His name is, I think he's fine, Alec Newman, but like his character is so
he's
sedate.
In a tough spot.
He's in a tough spot. So like he's just sort of like, he's kind of mystical, and he's kind of like, he says a lot of like, oh, you'll figure that out later in time. So like he doesn't have a lot to work with. But the two people I really enjoyed watching were Susan Sarandon.
I know who the other one is.
The little person.
Bijaz.
Yeah, I thought he was really fun.
No, that actor too. We'll get to him much later in this, but he also was just like, I'm like, just give these two a show.
Yeah.
Anyway, the princess, she obviously wants to take the Muad'Dib down because her father used to be the emperor. Weirdly dies off screen midway through the museum part one. She's like, my dad died. I'm like, oh, he's been here the whole time.
yeah. You're like, they're at the funeral. You're like, oh, it's that guy we didn't see. Interesting.
But her whole thing is she's hoping to get back the empire because she has a son of her own she'd like to give it to, who the only scene we see with him, he's just like, Mommy, learning to fight is hard. I'm only 7 years old. And she's like, and Susan Sarandon leans down and grabs his face. She's like, you're weak, child.
Yeah.
So
I love in all the fantasies that there's always like a kid who's like supposed to be destined to be a warrior or something, but he's just really like a nerd. It always happens. It's another trope where he's just like, can I just play with Legos and like talk about science? They're like, no, learn a sword.
Yeah. Of course, there's we'll get to her now. There's Paul's sister, Aaliyah Atreides. I believe that's how it's pronounced. And if you don't recall, she was spiced up in the womb and was born like with all the brains of all the people from the sister. What's the sisterhood called again? I don't remember.
I don't know. But yeah, so she's like constantly like seeing the future and present, and she's very like holistic.
Yeah. And so she appears to essentially be running the empire because the Muad'Dib's too busy like walking around in his robes outside.
Yeah. And let me ask you, why do we get an extended sequence where she sort of does like Jedi training and then for no reason take all her clothes off?
Yeah, her naked yoga sequence?
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you.
There's just like a sequence where basically she's doing yoga and you're like, oh, look at her, she's flexible. Then she like fights some discs that she like floats up.
Yeah. She throws flying discs that have blades in them. She dodges those for a while, and it's like, it's really going on for a long time.
And then for no reason she takes all her clothes off. And then like people come into the room and they're like, put your clothes on. She's like, why? Like, what is this? Why is the scene in this?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
I will say my favorite part for her is just a real quick moment. It's almost a throwaway, but Paul walks in. It might be at the end of that scene, actually. Paul walks in and he's just like, Aaliyah, they found a dead Fremen girl in the desert. Go CSI that for me. And she's like, okay. I'm like, is that her job too? She has to go like do crime scene investigation?
I thought the same thing. It was like a chief came into the police office and was like, hey, detective, they found a dead body. You go investigate it. That's exactly what the scene was. It was so funny. And she was like, okay, I guess I'll have to take old zombie corpse we haven't talked about.
Yes. But essentially the plot of part one is it all boils down to like it's a series of conspiracies and machinations being acted out around Paul.
Yeah.
But of course, Paul can see all possible futures and knows everything that's happening the entire time. And basically, he just keeps telling people around him, he's like, well, that guy's a bad guy. That guy's tricking me. That guy's going to do something bad to me later. And they're like, should we do something? He's like, it's cool. Let it happen. So the entire plot is just him being like, just let whatever's come and come. Don't worry about it.
No, I thought the same thing. Now, let me ask you this, your opinion. Do you think in some ways that makes him just like an overpower problem? Or is it just like it doesn't really matter because he just lets things happen? But do you know what I mean? Like if you have a character who could see all potential outcomes of conflicts, doesn't that sort of undercut the stakes?
Well, I think what it is, I think particularly in the Dune series, he can see what's coming, so nothing's a surprise to him. But it's more for the viewer and the audience. It's the eventual reveal of like what he like all the things he's willing to sacrifice and let happen for the awful thing he's planning.
Right.
Like I think the idea of it is just like imagine making all these sacrifices and like letting all these things happen to you and happen to those you love because you know there's a plan. And then when that, you know, and you, the audience, are like, well, the plan will be so good when it works out. And I think the trick of Dune is that like the thing that's going to work out is so aggressively awful to theoretically like a better end, but like you just have to like be the worst person on earth to do it. Like I think that's supposed to be the crux of the tension. Does this work on this movie? I don't know if it does, but like I think that's the theory of Dune anyway.
That's
Don't
interesting.
quote me.
And you know what? I like that, and I think it also just even more cements the idea. Like for whatever reason, I was more drawn to this than I was to the previous miniseries. Again, I don't love that trope of like the chosen Messiah. I find it boring, and I do find this is a little bit more nuanced and interesting. This whole idea. So if that's the case, then good old Frankie baby, as I call him.
Frankie baby. Susan Sarandon, of course, her whole thing, she wants to kill Paul. So she has allied herself with a faction called the Telesco, otherwise known as the Face Dancers.
Is this the fish boy?
No. We'll get to Fish Boy later. The Face Dancers have worked with her to clone Paul's old friend and mentor, Duncan Idaho.
Yeah.
And they've programmed him essentially to be a sleeper agent who will MK Ultra with the right keywords and kill Paul.
Yeah, he's like a Manchurian candidate. He sort of like knows it too. Like it seems like they play with that. He has some sort of they ask him about like, does he have memories? He's like, I have feelings. Like he kind of remembers being alive before. He's sort of a new person and an old person at the same time. And I think he also sort of knows that he's essentially like a bomb is what he is.
Yeah, that's sort of the plot. I believe he's a mentat in this, which I believe is the human computers of Dune. Anyway, doesn't matter. Susan, of course, gives Duncan to the newly formed Spacing Guild embassy on Arrakis. Paul's just let the Spacing Guild come back. These are the weird fish people you were talking about.
I loved it.
I believe they drive the ships.
I love the look of this guy, and it's funny with effects because I find that a lot of CGI effects don't age as well as even models or stuff like that as much. But this is like very 2003 TV CGI. But I love the look of him. I just love he's like a salamander type guy floating in a glass tube, and he's very articulate. I loved him.
I may not understand the subspecies of humans in the Dune universe, but in the original Dune, what I do recall is we see one of the pilots of the ships who I thought were the Spacing Guild people. I could be wrong. Maybe they're just a subsection of them. But I believe in the original one, they looked like human bats, which I think was even weirder.
Yeah, that's right. It was a different, but I think they also were encased in like an aquarium type thing, right?
Yeah. I think that is the case as well, I think. Just to go back to your point about the CGI, it is interesting because most of this is CGI. Most of this is shot on green screen. A lot of like sweeping shots. Honestly, it's pretty passable. Like it's definitely too.
I would agree.
CGI.
Most of it's pretty good.
I think because there are no real sets really. Like it's all kind of like it's like a precursor to like every movie today. Like all of it's on green screen, so at least it has a consistent look to it as a result.
Yeah, I would agree. There's only a few scenes that like kind of stick. Like there was a scene later with Jessica Alice Cringe, and it's like the lighting didn't match, and like this little character looks very CGI. But I think most of it, like to your point, most of it looks pretty good. It's like they've done they're like let's just do it all CGI, so it all kind of has one look, and I think it looks pretty good. I think the ships look pretty good. The quote unquote sets, as we'll call them, all look pretty decent. It looks like otherworldly.
Not to do this to you, Jordan, but did you just call her Alice Cringe?
What was her name?
Yeah, I think it's great. I just like the idea her name is Alice Cringe. Oh, there she comes. Time to cringe.
What's the actress's name?
It's Alice Krieg, I think.
Oh, is it Krieg? Is that how she pronounces her name? I wish that was Cringe.
I don't think she'd pronounce it cringe, do you?
I don't know. You could very well be right. Anyways.
Write in a better pronunciation of her name, but no names of these characters. I just want to hear a better pronunciation of Alice's name.
I feel bad not that I talk about her often, but I think I've always been calling it Cringe. Isn't it Kringe? Maybe it is Kring. You're probably right. It's Kring.
I don't know. I could be wrong. I always assumed it. Maybe I've been probably wrong. Maybe it is cringe. It's been cringe all along.
Sorry. Either way, I don't know.
Anyway, doesn't matter. I was just I for some reason that tickled me. They're gonna give Duncan Idaho to the fish people of the Space Guild to give to Paul as a welcome gift to their new embassy on Arrakis. Paul accepts it willingly, even though everyone's like, don't. They call it this one thing, and it's not quite Gollum, but it's very close. They keep calling it like a something, but which I actually kind of liked. I like the idea of having your clones called Golems. That's pretty good.
Well, yeah, they're all basically like all his advisors are like, this is like so obviously a plot to kill you in some way, and he's like, yeah, it's okay.
He's like, just let it happen. Just let it happen.
Yeah.
Anyway, the face dancer Susan's working with, he then goes into Arrakis, tracks down a Fremen who hates the Muad'Dib because his son was blinded in the war. That Fremen is caring for the daughter of some other dead Fremen who I guess was friends with Paul or something. I don't know. The face dancer then murders them all, and face dancers' things, in addition to cloning, apparently are that they can just like look like anybody. They're just like chameleons. So he becomes the girl, and then he goes to see Paul and says, hey, my father has a warning about a conspiracy against you from the Fremen people, and you got to go see my father to learn the conspiracy. And she leaves, and Paul's just like, that's a face dancer. That's not the girl. But I'm going to go anyway. So we're just going to see what's happening here. And I was just like, whew, a lot happening. It is an
interesting thing, and it's what we mentioned before, is that the actor doesn't have a lot to work with because that's how his response is to everything. They're like, it's a plot. He's like, it's fine. They're like, hey, this thing's happening. It's fine. So it's just like, it's always what I kind of felt about like Luke Skywalker. I thought Luke in in Return of the Jedi, the third Star Wars, he was the most boring because they just had he had to be now like a Jedi, and he was just like emotionless sort of thing, where it's like, hey, he's more fun when he's like a whiny little brat, at least there's something there. It's just like there's something about this level of peace and holistic understanding that's a little bit like, there's not a lot here.
Well, it is like someone comes in, explains the plot to you, and you're like, yeah, I know, I already know.
Yeah, it's like every scene with him, you're like, okay, well, God, we had this.
Anyway, Paul goes back into his robes, goes into the city undercover. He goes to see this girl's father, who we were told is dead, so I'm assuming another face dancer is also playing his father. And he's just like, there's a conspiracy, but I can't give you information, but I'll give you a gift. This guy named Bijaz who talks in riddles and is both one of the better actors who's having a lot of fun, but also the most annoying character. It's like such a weird character.
Which one was Bijaz? I'm trying to remember who he was.
Bijaz, he's your favorite character.
Oh, that's his name?
Him and Susan. Yeah,
I didn't.
Bijaz.
I didn't catch his name. I liked his little outfits. I liked his little hat. I didn't know his name was Bijaz.
He was like, if Bijaz were called Bejoozle, you'd still Bijaz my boozle. I'm like, what? What does that mean?
Those sorts of things I don't pay attention to. They're like, oh, they're speaking a weird rhyme. It doesn't matter to me.
But you're right. This actor's doing a great job. He's very compelling to watch in what is like could have been the like Jar Jar Binks' most annoying role of this. He's at least having fun with it. Yeah. Even though his character is the most like the whole thing is like they bring it back because he knows about a conspiracy, and the entire movie they're like, so who is the conspiracy? He's just like, well, the Weedly Dee. If you look in your mirror, you'll see CC. I'm like, just say the names. I think the sister at some point just like, just tell me a name. Just tell me a name. And he's just like, doodly doo. I'm like,
yeah.
What are we doing here?
And he was doing all this, and I was like, look at that hat he's got on. That's interesting.
Anyway, Paul gets Bijaz. They leave the house, and apparently, because later, like, Susan Sarandon will be like, I don't know how that happened either. Nobody knows. A giant bomb called the Stone Burner explodes in the middle of town that, like, everyone else is just like, why'd that bomb go off? And everyone's like, I don't know. Nobody knows but Paul. And it blinds Paul. Like, his eyes are burnt out by the bomb as he saves Bijaz. And, like, his troops come down, like, a neighborhood's wiped out. And they're like, are you okay, sir? Your eyes are gone. He's like, nah, I'm cool. And he just walks off. He's like, how can he see? It's like, I guess it's his spice vision. I'm like, all right, cool. So why? Okay, glad he's blind.
I loved it though. But they do an effect though to show that like he can see, but it's not the way eyes normally work. It's sort of like a little bit more shadowy and things are like blurry. But he can, I think this whole thing of like this huge weapon is attacked and it almost looks like an atomic bomb sort of thing. And they're like, oh no, he's being hit. He's like he's blind. He's like, it's fine. You're like, okay, all right. It's just like everything with him is just so like, don't worry about it. Yeah, chill out. Everything's cool. You're like, okay, all right.
The thing is, on paper, I see how this is an exciting scene with a huge twist that's revealed. It's just because it's all happening so quickly in this miniseries, like nothing has much weight to it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It seemed like this would be something that would happen before like a commercial break, like this huge big thing, and then like, oh no, what's gonna happen? Paul's missing. Now they have to figure out how to do things without him. Is he dead? Sort of thing. But it's just like he's blind, but not really.
Anyway, at some point during the intervening, what seems like maybe 45 minutes that have happened in world, I mean, maybe 2 days at best.
Yeah.
Cheney got pregnant.
It happened.
Paul knows, because he can see everything, that means it's time to move on to the next part of his vision for the future, his golden path, if you will, and that's to move out to the desert so she can have her kids. You know, they're kind of a whole thing where like there's a conspiracy going on, but Paul needs to move on to the next part of his plan. There's kind of like there's a little back and forth about what they should do. And there's a weird scene where he's like, I'm going out to the desert with her. I'm taking my 3 new friends, Bijaz, Duncan, Idaho, and that face dancer pretending to be a girl out to the desert with us. And one of his like they're walking to a spaceship. Those 3 characters are walking 6 feet in front of Paul and his advisor, and his advisor's like, but you know they're all conspirators trying to kill you. He's like, I know, but we're bringing them anyway. I'm like, everybody can hear you talking. Like,
yeah,
everyone's standing next to each other.
It was a little bit of a blocking thing, but yes. But I like more the thought that, again, over and over this, people are like, you know, this is a conspiracy. He's like, yep. And you're like, okay, well, I guess if he's not worried, me as a viewer also won't be worried, because who cares?
But thankfully for me personally, the viewer, we cut back to Susan Sarandon, and she reveals she has a plot within her own plot. And that is she's teamed up with the fishmen of the Spacing Guild to steal a sandworm from Arrakis to get her own spice farm going. And the best sequence of this part 1 is them trapping and capturing a sandworm in like nets and like dragging it out of it was insane.
Basically what it is they set off a series of explosions which shoots water, and it basically makes like a water fence so it can't escape, and then they come in and can scoop it up. I agree, it looked pretty good, and I thought, how come no one's tried this before? Like if this spice like rules the universe and it's so important, I'm like, and no one has thought to just steal these things? I'm like, good on Susan.
I mean, I will say it's a part where I think it probably worked better on paper. Like, they don't really, I guess you're supposed to know because Paul's going to the desert and there's all this conspiracy in the court. Everyone's kind of distracted, so you're able just to, like, you can get past the defense. But none of that's really clear, so it happens. But I will say this. Do you remember that one part where they throw the rope over the giant worm and those 2 guys try to shove it through the keyhole so they can, like, get the worm, but the worm, like, puts his head up, and the one little guy gets flung in the air and screams, and the worm eats him.
Yeah, I do remember that.
That was great. I love that part.
Yeah, I it made me laugh because I like that they have this whole giant plan with explosions and all these things to get it round up, but you still need a dude to put the thread through the needle. I'm like, just have them be able to like shoot in with a robot or something.
But you wouldn't get that guy tossed in the air and go, ah!
That's right. That's true.
Chomp. Anyway, Cheney speed runs her pregnancy. It happens so fast. And they kind of have a montage where she's giving birth. And in that montage, Paul's sister, Aaliyah, is now initiating Operation Execute All the Conspirators Against My Brother. So we see a montage of her giving birth, and they just keep cutting to people being executed. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know. I'm like, well, that lady's dead. I don't really know who she was.
It reminded me of the end of The Godfather, where it's the same thing. It was like, except it's the christening. Michael standing over the christening of his, I think it's his nephew, I think it is. And at the same time, they intercut with that he's pledging this religious sayings that at the same time he's killing all the heads of the families. It was the same sort of thing. It's like, he's doing this one lovely thing's happening, and there's all horrible things happening at the same time, intercut.
But it sort of, it all goes well. The plan works. Paul goes in to see his babies, and they've been twins have been born.
Yeah, Luke and Leia.
Well, and then some reason Paul's like, didn't see that one coming. I'm like, what? What do you mean?
He maybe he's got a little blind spot when it comes to twins.
I guess so. Cheney dies in his arms. And of course, this is the moment Duncan Idaho's code word is said, and we see that Duncan Idaho is gonna kill Paul, but he can't do it because he's not just a clone anymore. He's the rebirth of Duncan Idaho. So he kills Bijaz instead because Bijaz was born in the same clone tank as him, so they're kind of brothers, and Bijaz can control his mind like a puppet master maybe, but not that effectively because Duncan Idaho throws a knife into him. I'm not clear what was happening.
Yeah, well, we saw earlier that like Bijaz there, it was sort of like speaking to him like through his mind. We have a scene where he's like, you show him like it's like almost like he's going crazy. So like they have. It's not that clear, but it's like he in some way is pulling his strings, as it were. But yes, it does not. It's all for naught because his soul is stronger, or whatever it is, his willpower, and he like overtakes it. And Paul, I guess, knew.
Yeah, sorry I skipped that psychic scene where Bedazzle shows up and says, "Fee fi fo fum, we were born in a clone tank together."
Yeah. Anyways, that happened. But yes, and then and Paul does a little quick run to because what happens is the guy shows up and he's like, hey, you didn't know it was me, I was pretending to be that girl, and I'm gonna kill your kids now with a knife. And Paul's like, don't worry, I can speed real fast and take it out of your hands.
No, but you forget, Jordan, the face dancer, he also had his plot within a plot, which is like what everyone likes to say in this. Which I will say, I like this, and I think also probably works better on the page, but he reveals that, yes, he's been working with Susan Sarandon, but him and his faction they attempted to clone Duncan Idaho because they were actually trying to create the first clone who would retain the memories of the original person.
That's right.
Essentially creating resurrection. And they did that explicitly to get into this scenario where they could show him that, yes, we created a Duncan Idaho that is the real Duncan Idaho. And with your wife dead now, we can bring her back. So if you ally with us, we can get your beloved wife back. And this is supposed to be his big,
Right.
This is supposed to be Paul's big problem is he's like, to go down his golden path, he has to let Chani die, but someone's now offering a chance to bring her back. And we haven't really talked about it, Jordan. But throughout the episode, which makes the fact that he didn't know he had twins more funny. I don't think that's the right phrasing, but funnier. That throughout the episode, Paul keeps meeting his twins in a dream state, and they keep talking to him. And one of his twins is James McAvoy.
A shirtless. Now, why he's shirtless, I don't know. But it's a very young, shirtless James McAvoy who's like, how would you describe his performance? Smarmy? Like, I don't know what it is. It's very weird. He's like, I'm going to tell you stuff. I'm like, why are you acting that way?
But essentially, he appears in his dad's brain. He's just like, hey, you created the first, like, twins that, like, live through all time because we're all spiced up like you and Mom, and, like, we can see everything from the past and the future. It can appear in your brain. And we're like, and it's just like, don't give in to getting Mom back. You don't need her. We're going to do all the golden path stuff for you. And Paul's like, thank you for your courage, son. I think he says at some point, he's like, Dad, use my eyes.
That's
like,
right.
okay,
I'm sorry. I
sure.
forgot all this. Yeah. So like, he basically, what happens is as soon as Duncan Idaho, I should have done this in order. As soon as Duncan like has his like fight against like his programming to kill, at that same time, or just about that time, Paul loses his vision. This vision he's been having that like, even though he's blind, he could still sort of see, but now he's actually blind. So he actually panics a little bit. He's like, I actually can't see anything. He's been having these visions from his son. I don't know if it was both twins, but I know at least one of them was there.
She's in all the visions. You see a girl in robes, and I which is fine. It doesn't matter. I know she's there.
But yeah, so in some, and I apologize to people who are real Dune fans and understand the intricacies of these books, but somehow this guy is essentially speaking to him over space and time, his son. It doesn't operate in the same way. So he's having this conversation with his dad and telling him, like, you should just trust us, keep doing what you're doing. And then basically Paul at this point is like, well, I'm blind. I can't do anything now. I actually don't have this ability. And he's like, don't worry. You obviously know that over space and time, you can use my eyeballs in some sort of weird mystical way. And Paul's like, oh, great. That does help. And so he uses his eyes and allows him to see for a short amount of time.
I'm going to be honest with you. I did not realize I didn't realize that he had lost his vision at that point. So that makes a lot more sense to me.
Yes. Yeah. So what it is I don't know what was the, what created that, but he suddenly loses his eyes. That's why he was like, and so yes, then he uses his son's eyes, and that enables him to speed run and grab the knife out of the guy's hand so he doesn't kill the twins. So, which makes me think actually that old McAvoy just really didn't want to get stabbed, right? Because to be
I mean,
fair,
it's very self-preservation.
yeah, yeah, because it's its future self is floating around. So Paul's able to, or Muad'Dib is able to stab the guy, finish another of these plot within a plots, and you're like, oh, good. But I have to say, it was the most panicked he was for like an actor who the whole time had to be like, everything's fine, everything's cool. And it just, again, to reiterate the point, it's hard to have a very charismatic lead who has nothing to do, really.
Yeah, it would give the actor a little something in that scene.
Yeah, exactly.
Something to chew on for himself. But yeah, Paul has now secured his golden path to the future. So he disappears into the desert to hang out with the sandworms or something. And the twins are sent to live across town with Duncan Idaho and his sister, who have been having meet cutes all episode and clearly falling in love. So I guess they're going to raise the twins together. And the sort of part one wraps up. It's pretty neatly tied up. I think that's the end of probably the book they were adapting. But a voiceover comes on to assure us, don't worry, tune in tomorrow. I bet you there'll be some more conspiracies you could watch.
Yeah. Oh, and I should mention that Paul's sister and Duncan get it on. She's like, I love this zombie guy.
Well, that we always knew that was going to happen. The eyes they were making for each other.
Yeah, that's true. Also, she's constantly taking her clothes off, so, that's sending signals.
I mean, to be fair, there were like 7 other people in that room. He couldn't know it was for him.
That's true. She was just like, anyone?
All right, Jordan, do you have any final notes before we get into ratings for old part 1 of Children of Dune?
No, a pretty interesting, like we've said, it's like there's clearly a lot they're trying to get across and a lot to adapt. So sometimes it feels like they're rushing through things and it's a lot of information. But I think I liked this more than I liked the other ones. I felt like the pacing was better, and I felt like, I don't know, maybe it's just that I just haven't seen this, where I've seen the other Dune so many times. So I like this a lot more than I like the first ones.
Well, then what do you want to rate it?
I'm going to go okay with a rating. I'm going to give this just a 6 out of 10. I'm hoping the next parts get better. I think this was a little bit, maybe too much setup for me, and it was like, it was okay. But I think still better than the first ones.
As you know, I gave 1s to the first ones. I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah.
I have been, obviously, I think a little curt, a little maybe rude to the miniseries so far, I think, in the recording of our podcast. I think it was okay. It was clear. I understood what was happening. I didn't find the sets to be as... or not the sets, but I think the last one had a real Shakespearean tone to it, which I think they don't have here. It's people are clear what's happening. I liked Susan Sarandon. I liked Bijaz. Is it good? I don't really think so. I think it's more like a Wikipedia page brought to life.
That's interesting. You might not be wrong. It's like, I do think the one thing is I can't tell if it's so dense or if it's on the line of a little bit boring. It's not really boring, but it's not riveting.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's boring either. I would just say there was clearly so much information that there's no time. They're just trying to like get everything you need to know in, which as a result doesn't make it particularly dramatic. But I was also clear, and I'm following the plot, I'm following the conspiracies. You've whittled them down to the most like succinct possible ways, and like I am interested. I am interested in where it's going. So like I'm enjoying it. But again,
it's a bit of an achievement, isn't it? Just to be able to take what I'm assuming is like a 1,000-page book and be able to bring it down to coalesce into this. There's something to be said about that.
Oh, I mean, it's the opposite of the Tommyknockers, where they were like, we don't have enough movie, let's make 2. There was like, what if we just take it and make it the tightest one we can?
Yeah.
The like Messiah into one part 1. I think it was a good choice. I don't think it's necessarily a great movie as a movie, but I still had an okay time. I'm going to go 6.
Yeah, 6. So look, the same score. Well, we'll see what the next parts are. This was, to your point, a real setup one. So I'm hoping that it sort of like pays off in the next 2.
The YouTube summary of the Dune books I saw gave me a spoiler for what's to come, and I am very excited to see how it's visualized.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm excited now too.
I won't spoil it for you, but it is, if done like it, I think it's supposed to happen, should be fairly bananas.
Good. We always like that.
But I guess that about wraps it up. I think it's a nice tease. I'm excited to watch more of it, which I couldn't say about the last Dune. That was a drag. So far, so good. You, of course, at home, please don't write in and tell us how bad we pronounced all the names. We know we did a bad job, but we're not very good at pronouncing names. It's a flaw. Don't use our email, continuedrag@gmail.com, to tell us that. Just assume I'm going to bed tonight thinking, oh man, I did a bad job, because I will, I promise. And on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, you will see some clips from us. There's some great clips. The Weird Fishmen, you get to see how you catch a sandworm.
Yeah, that's good.
So here's a question, Jordan. If you catch a sandworm and put it on a hook, can you catch a bigger fish with that, like a big sandfish?
Yeah, it depends if there's another planet that has those, I guess. Now, that's something you can write in. Is there a planet with even bigger fish that eat sandworms? Let us know.
The people come and catch the sandworms.
Yeah.
Anyway, but there's some good clips from these, so you can find all that on social media at Continuum Drags, our handle on all those platforms. But that wraps it up. So, listener, thank you for joining us, and Jordan, I'll see you on the next one.
I'll see you then.
Can't get enough Continuum Drag? Commission a bonus episode for charity.
Want us to watch an episode we missed after using the escape pod or during a best of run? No problem.
Is there an episode of a series we've never watched or a TV movie you want us to cover? You got it.
Wish we'd comment on your favorite movie, content, or other weird media? Sure, why not?
All you have to do is make a donation to one of the charities selected by past guests on our website.
We suggest a donation of $50 per television hour of content we're watching, but everyone's means are different, so give what you can.
Get all the details about bonus episodes for charity on our website, continuumdrag.podbean.com, or follow the links in our social media profiles.
Continuum Drag is recorded in Ontario, Canada, and Seoul, South Korea. Theme music by James Rick Seidler, produced by Jordan Dullock and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Hughes.